the heart of London pulsed with anger as thousands of farmers descended upon Westminster, their fury directed squarely at Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour government. This was no ordinary protest. It was a fierce and impassioned uprising against Labour's recent decision to hike inheritance taxes on agricultural workers. A move many believe is not just misguided, but actively destructive, threatening to gut the very soul of rural Britain. The streets echoed with chants and the clamour of boots on pavement as farmers marched, banners in hand, vowing to protect their way of life against a government they accused of being utterly disconnected from reality. For these farmers, Labour's inheritance tax raid isn't a mere policy issue, it's a death sentence for family-run farms that have been passed down through generations. Jeremy Clarkson, now a farmer himself, emerged as an unexpected hero of the protest, delivering a fiery speech that drew thunderous applause. "They're tearing apart the bones of Britain," he bellowed, his voice carrying the kind of righteous indignation that resonated deeply with the gathered crowd. Clarkson's impassioned plea framed the battle as more than a political disagreement. This was a cultural reckoning. Political commentator Charlie Downes added fuel to the fire, lambasting Starmer and his cabinet for their cold and calculated approach to governance. First it was pensioners, then it was pubs, and now it's farmers, Downes declared on GB News, his words dripping with contempt. This government isn't just misguided, it's actively hacking away at the lifeblood of Britain. They're transforming the country into a sterile economic zone, void of culture, heritage, or belonging. The scenes in Westminster were electric, almost cinematic, as tractors rolled into the capital and farmers stood shoulder to shoulder in defiance. Downes likened the spectacle to something out of a historical drama, a clash between the embattled, salt-of-the-earth working class and an aloof government more interested in spreadsheets than soil. For many, the contrast was striking. On one side, the farmers and their impassioned defenders fighting to preserve their livelihoods. On the other, Starmer, described as a distant and unfeeling bureaucrat, ploughing ahead with policies critics say will devastate rural communities. The anger reached fever pitch as the implications of Labour's inheritance tax plan became clearer. Farmers argued that the policy disproportionately targets small and medium-sized farms, forcing many families to sell off their land just to cover the tax burden. Labour's claim that the changes would only affect a handful of wealthy landowners rang hollow to those who understood the realities of farm valuation. The fear of losing not just land but a way of life drove the farmers to Westminster, determined to make their voices heard. Even among Labour supporters, there were signs of unease. Commentator Matthew Laza suggested that Labour could avoid a complete disaster if they carefully revised the policy details. But his cautious optimism was undercut by a warning. If Labour mishandles this issue, it could backfire spectacularly, alienating rural voters and deepening divisions within the party. For now, the damage seems done, with many farmers vowing to withhold their votes from Labour at the next election. While the farmer revolt dominated headlines, another Labour crisis simmered just beneath the surface. The party's pledge to end the use of hotels for asylum seekers has come under intense scrutiny following revelations that hotel use has actually increased since Labour took power in July. Despite promises to shutter these controversial accommodations, Home Office Minister Dame Angela Eagle admitted to Parliament that 14 new hotels had been opened, even as 7 others were closed. This revelation has ignited a firestorm of criticism from both sides of the political aisle. Conservatives, quick to pounce, accused Labour of hypocrisy and incompetence. Sir Gavin Williamson expressed outrage, claiming that the opening of new hotels in his constituency was done without transparency or local consultation. For Labour, it's an optics nightmare. Eagle attempted to shift blame onto the Conservatives, citing the massive backlog of asylum cases left by the previous government, but her words did little to quell the growing backlash. Labour's handling of the asylum crisis has raised questions about its competence and commitment to reform. Eagle emphasised that Labour has increased the processing of asylum cases significantly, with monthly figures rising from under 1,000 under the Conservatives to over 10,000. But critics argue that progress is meaningless without tangible results. For communities grappling with the reality of asylum hotels, Labour's reassurances feel like little more than empty promises. Adding an unexpected twist to the week's chaos, tech mogul Elon Musk has found himself embroiled in a heated feud with UK MPs. Labour's Select Committee, led by Chi MP, has summoned Musk to explain X's, formerly Twitter, role in spreading alleged disinformation during the summer riots. The committee's decision has sparked a transatlantic spat, with Musk firing back in characteristically combative style. In a fiery response, Musk warned British MPs that they could just as easily find themselves summoned to the United States to explain what he called censorship and threats to American citizens. His remarks have only escalated tensions, with Musk accusing the UK of veering toward authoritarianism. His description of Britain as going full Stalin has drawn both outrage and amusement, highlighting the cultural gulf between Musk's freewheeling libertarianism and Labour's more interventionist approach to social media regulation. Onwurah, undeterred, expressed her determination to hold Musk accountable for what she described as his promotion of pure disinformation. But behind the scenes, murmurs of a potential diplomatic intervention have begun to circulate. Nigel Farage, ever the opportunist, has hinted that he might step in as a mediator between Musk and the UK government. The idea of Farage acting as a bridge between Musk, the UK, and even Donald Trump has raised eyebrows, with some viewing it as a cynical ploy for attention and others as a practical solution to an escalating conflict. As these scandals unfold, they paint a damning picture of Labour's first months in power. From the fury of the farmers to the Asylum hotel debacle and Musk's high-profile feud, the party appears increasingly embattled on multiple fronts. Critics argue that these crises reflect a deeper problem, a leadership disconnected from the realities of the people it seeks to govern. Starmer's opponents have been quick to capitalise on his perceived aloofness, portraying him as a technocrat who values policy over people. For farmers, asylum seekers, and even global tech moguls like Musk, Labour's actions have fostered a sense of alienation and mistrust. The question now is whether Labour can course-correct before these scandals erode its political capital entirely. For the farmers, the fight is far from over. Many have vowed to continue their protests until Labour walks back the inheritance tax changes entirely. For those living near asylum hotels, the promise of a better system feels increasingly hollow. And for Musk, the battle with British MPs is just another chapter in his ongoing crusade against what he views as government overreach. Each of these crises, though distinct, underscores a common theme, a growing disconnect between Labour's leadership and the people it governs. Whether Starmer can bridge that gap remains to be seen, but for now, the pressure is mounting. The farmers are still marching, the hotels are still filling, and Musk, he's still watching. The stakes have never been higher, and the clock is ticking.